I wanted to talk to you a little bit about music and kind of how that's been part of this culture. Like, what was music for you, and how did it kind of tie in? And I'll go back to a story. I remember, like, you would go around and like pick up players for practice and whatnot. Like in the very beginning, you know, it was like I said, you were picking up these dudes from Burton Heights and like getting them to practice because, you know, their parents were at work or whatever, you know. And I remember, I think it was like a green minivan or something that you would drive around, but it was always like, you know, playing the music that I still listen to. And like even Ruben was talking about, like I feel like I listened to reggaeton because of you, you know, like Don Omar, like all that, Wisin y Yandel, like that's all. What was music for you, and like how did it tie in with soccer?
I guess it depends on the genre of music, but
also hip hop, yeah.
But I feel like they just go hand in hand to me. You know, the movements on a soccer field, on a futsal court, the individuality, the flow, and just it's the way that music makes you feel. For me, it's the same thing. You know, when I watch, for example, a YouTube video, and you have just the right beat or the right song to the video, it's just something that I want to watch. And I don't know, it's just, for me, it's always gone hand in hand. But for me as a coach, there's a lot of examples that I use as far as the history of some of these artists from the hip hop industry, to the same way where in other countries, professional players and where they come from. It's a very similar story to these artists, to professional soccer players. So I always related it, just in a few different ways. Right,
and it's like that thing about NBA players want to be rappers and rappers want to be NBA players.
Yep.
It's that same old thing, man. I was gonna ask you about your dad, El Profe, because I would always watch this dude, and he was, I don't know how old he was when he was playing, but he seemed like, I don't know, like 60 years old. How old was he when he stopped playing soccer?
He actually was still playing up until a couple years ago. Then he got injured. But I honestly don't know how he kept doing it. And he, I mean, at a decent level, he was still, I think, playing up until like 45 years old. But just always fit, healthy, and
why do they call him? Why do they call him El Profe? What's that about?
He was a teacher in Mexico. So it didn't last very long because we came to the United States, but I think he's one of two people from our hometown that went past school beyond, I don't know what it is, like 6th, 7th grade in our hometown. So he went and completed his education and became a teacher.
And then came to the States, man. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I hear, so my dad, I don't know how he knows this, but he's like, oh yeah, he was a gym teacher over there. Is that right?
No, I mean, I think at that time everybody kind of did everything in the school to help out, but it was just, I think during that time there were such small classrooms that you had mixed groups of different age groups in one classroom, so you can teach everything.
Yeah.
Right.
He was telling me that he was really big into fitness. Was he ever your guys' trainer? Like, did he coach you guys at all? Did he like make you run, and like, was he just apart from the soccer? You guys just played together?
I think he was a huge motivation for us to work hard at anything that we did. Yeah. Didn't really push us to play soccer. It was just something that we just always enjoyed. Right. And you know, tagging along with him to his games, just kind of automatically instilled that in us to wanna play the game. But he's very disciplined and very strict growing up. Yeah. So we had to follow the rules. So it got to the point where it wasn't even a thing that he had to mention. It was just something that was just understood. We had to work hard at everything that we did.
Yeah, he seems like a cool dude. Was any of that discipline? Because I feel like you're a straight shooter. You've been so consistent with your energy and how you treat people. And this has been since you were a young cat, you know, like even Lito said it, like you've never really changed. Like you've been authentic, you've had this vision, and like to trust that vision of like soccer should be this way and soccer should have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And it's been that way since, you know, the beginning. And like it's, you know, now it's turned into this thing of, you know, just like generations now of people playing. How did you keep on track with that? And how did you, what's the right question here? How did you kind of keep on that vision, I guess?
I think really early on, I had an idea that I kind of took away from a movie. So I don't know if you ever heard of the movie The Pistol.
The Pistol.
It's about Pete Maravich. He was a professional basketball player.
Pete Maravich.
And at that time,
Pistol
he
Pete.
was Pistol Pete.
Yeah, I've heard of that guy.
At that time, he was like the Ronaldinho of basketball. So I watched that really early on, and the way the kid's dad trained him, and his approach to the game, his concepts of how to take that individuality and be part of a team. Combining that with the way that I grew up playing the game, combining with my coaching education that I received when I first started, and that Latican style idea was born, and I was set that was the right way to try to teach and play the game.
Wow.
I just stuck to it.
It's amazing, man, and you're still sticking to it. And it's you got something going here, man. I mean, obviously. I wanted to talk to you about the mental side of the game, because I feel like you are very, I don't know, you're a very humble man. Like, you really, and I mentioned it to Lito, like, you don't seem like a know-it-all. Like, you seem like a know-it-some, and like, but when you say something, like, it's spot on, like it's something important. How do you check your ego with, like, I'm gonna call it success, like, within this industry? Like, how are you so humble, and how do you see any, like, battles with ego or, like, that type of thing?
I think growing up, I was always really quiet, and I got a lot of practice in observing people, different personalities. I was always big into trying to figure out exactly why people are the way they are, and spent a lot of time putting myself in other people's shoes. And I think that has led for me to try to look at myself and be a little bit more aware of my decisions and all the consequences that come from my decisions. So I think we all get to a point where we get too carried away or get too big-headed with any type of success. So it's a consistent trying to check yourself to make sure that you stay on the path and you continue to put energy into the things that really matter. So I think it's just creating a habit of doing that.
Discipline. When did that start for you? Because I don't know, I feel like it must have started pretty young for you. Like, was it like I don't know, something happened, or was it just like, how did that all go down?
There was when I was 18. I actually went to a church retreat when I was 18 years old, and I think that's probably during the same time where I met your parents.
Yeah,
part of the same circle.
I was gonna say that. Yeah.
I think that weekend and on that church retreat was eye-opening. And I think it allowed me to look at myself in a way that I never had, and it just started me on a different journey of self-awareness.
Self-awareness, yeah. And I guess going off of that, and I know Jesse has talked to me about plenty of times, the Enneagram, and you've implemented it into even your coaches now, your coaching staff. What is important about the Enneagram, or I guess just like self-awareness? Why do you think it's important?
I think relationships is probably the most important thing when it comes to coaching. And in order to build connections with your players and build these relationships with your players, right, you first have to start with understanding yourself a little bit more before you can understand other people. 100%. And I think the Enneagram is a great tool to help you understand yourself a little bit better.
Right.
And for our coaches, in order to get the most out of our coaches, I feel like It's not, the Enneagram, I don't think it's what everybody needs to do, but it's been a tool that's worked for myself, and I wanted to share that with our coaching staff. And up until now, the coaches love it. Some have, have spent a lot more time looking at it than others, but I think it's been great part to add into our coaching staff.
Yeah, so I did a little Enneagram test, and it was actually pretty revealing. I was a 3, whatever that might mean to anyone out there. But yeah, it was cool kind of seeing a little bit about who I am and why I am. And it's like, it's so obvious, like it makes perfect sense when you're like, why didn't I realize this before, And like, I think it's a good place to start at least, and so can, a lot of different things. But yeah, it's that self-awareness and then bringing in the discipline. So yeah, man, it's been cool watching. I guess I was young before, but like just realizing kind of how your path has went and what you have to stick to. And then obviously, like, Jesse's one of my best friends, and like you've affected him, and therefore like affected me. So Jesse and I, like, we have these conversations quite a bit. But yeah, super cool, man. I'm a big fan of the Enneagram. We'll get to it, man. We'll dig into it more.
All right.
I wanted to talk to you about the relationship between soccer and futsal. Just, I guess, on a macro level. Like, how do you think? Because right now it's not exactly a professional sport, right? Like, how do you think it ties in with soccer, and like, how do you think in the future it will tie in with soccer?
Well, I think in the past, maybe 10 years ago, soccer players during the off season are playing other sports. Some like to play indoor soccer and make that part of what takes up their time during the winter while soccer kicks back, or at least in Michigan. But I think futsal has added a new element, at least in West Michigan, for those who are playing. Just a lot more touches, promoting ball control and taking players on, which I think even at the highest level right now, I think most people can agree that's probably the difference between the United States and other countries who are playing soccer all the time, not just when they go to practice. And I think futsal can help us get there, can help us develop those number 10s that we're missing in the United States. And it's a way for players to continue to play during the off season. I think,
especially in Michigan, man.
Yeah, for sure. I do think there's a conflict between soccer and futsal. I think I'm sure some coaches or some clubs feel threatened by the sport, especially those who are not allowing themselves to learn about the game, and those are not taking advantage of the benefits of futsal.
Right.
But hopefully we'll continue to change, or at least coaches will give it a try and see if it's something that will benefit them and their players.
So you're working with futsal at like a national level, right? What is your goal with that whole thing? Like, are you trying to implement something at like a national level? And how do they respond to it?
Well, my current role right now with United States Youth Futsal is running a state ID trial to identify players and recommend to the national ID trial, where they select the national teams for these international trips that happen every year. So I'm part of that process. I'm part of the coaching staff that gets to coach these teams when we travel outside of the U.S. for competition. And I mean, I love it. I love the experience I've had in learning about different cultures and what the futsal looks like outside of the United States. So I've just been blessed that I'm able to be part of that program.
Yeah, and honestly, West Michigan has quite the talent pool, man. You've sent, and I don't know if you have numbers on this, but like how many players do you think you've sent to either the national, like the adult national team, or like the youth, like for their age group national team?
I think it was Jesse, Diego, who was part of our club growing up, and
yeah, he just played at the last World Cup, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah,
and Alexis Mendez,
Alexis. Yeah,
who also grew up through our youth system.
yeah.
And there's been a few players that have played with ABK on our men's team as guest players, or have played with us in the past, that have also had an opportunity to play on the U.S. team. But as far as the youth, at the youth level, I don't know exactly how many players, but it's probably over 25 players, I would guess.
How do you feel about, like, because I feel like, I don't know, sometimes, and I've been in Grand Rapids my whole life, and it's like, oh yeah, Grand Rapids is a little town, you know, and then you're pumping out 25 players to go on to the national team. Like, how do you feel about that? Because, man, it could be from LA or Chicago, you know, and you got, what the heck is going on over there in Grand Rapids? This guy. Well, how do you feel about that?
I mean, it's humbling. I don't think it's just me. I feel like I feel like it's the culture. I think everything comes back to the culture that we've created.
Yeah.
And everybody who's part of making, you know, that environment happen during our training, and that surround our club. I think that's really what makes it different. The same thing where you know, in other countries, the reason why people play out on the streets, and those are the players that a lot of times reach the highest level, not necessarily the players who go through professional academies as youth. A lot of times those are not the players that make it to the top, are the kids that are playing out on the streets. So, and that's been our whole idea, is taking that environment and putting it on in a more professional setting on a futsal court. Has just been, you know, the concept.
Yeah, and it's crazy because now it's kind of shifting over to, you know, before futsal was like this thing that the Mexican Americans did, and now we're getting, I'm going to call it like more Americans and people that were just playing club soccer are tapping into the futsal and like seeing great benefits from it. Like, I'll mention it again, Jonathan Stout here, that's like, he plays a lot of soccer, like he's going to Michigan State to go play soccer, but like a lot of his foot skills and like awareness on the field, his, we'll call it escape techniques, you know, like it all comes from futsal. Pretty cool to see. Just a lot of people tapping into it and like finally seeing some benefits from it. Do you think futsal would become like collegiate sport someday?
I think it's gonna be tough. I think because it's hard to get it into the high school system and to make it a high school sport, I feel like it'll be difficult for it to be a college sport. But I mean, realistically, everything is set up for futsal to be a sport in college or high school. I mean, there's more than enough gymnasiums in each school to make it happen. The structure's there. So hopefully it does become a college sport. It'd be awesome for a soccer player to have the ability to play soccer in college and then in a different season play futsal. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there.
Yeah, it'd be crazy, man. Who knows, man? I mean, and this, like, futsal really is probably 10 years old in the States. So it's like we're still at the infant stage. You talk about it's only the beginning. Where do you see Ole futsal, or like just, as I was, and you were here, but I was saying like you are like the Johan Cruyff of West Michigan soccer, like street soccer, futsal, and then you got, you know, maybe Guardiola is Lito, and then Jesse might be Xavi now. Like, where do you see this line going, and like, what are you most excited about? Like, what do you feel like, if this is your baby, like, what are you gonna say nice about it? Like, what are you most excited about?
I think Tupac in an interview once said that he knew that he wasn't going to be the change in the world, but he was going to spark the mind of the person that was going to make the change in the world. Yeah. And I like to think about it that way. I like to think about it where my ideas and my concepts are going to inspire the next generation to try to keep that going and continue to make a difference in people's lives.
It's cool, man.
So that's I think that's my whole thing.
And that's always been different, you know, like I don't know, like I was listening to this podcast about Mike Tyson, and he was talking about like who's the GOAT, who's the greatest of all time for boxing, and he will always say Muhammad Ali. And he's like, no man, like people say like, no man, it's you. He's like, no man. And he's like, what's the difference then? Like why is he the GOAT? And he always say like Muhammad Ali did it for everyone else, where like I did it for me. And that's and I feel like it's always been like that for you, man. And it's pretty cool to see people supporting you, I guess, and like everyone realizes what your intentions are. So it's and it's been consistent, you know, it's never been off of that track. You have a family now. How does that change things? You got another one on the way.
Yep.
How does that change it for you? Does your daughter play soccer? Does your wife like understand the soccer community?
Yeah, I mean, it changes a lot. The last 5 years have been completely different than before. But my daughter is playing with ABK, plays for Revolution, so playing soccer and futsal. My wife also comes from a big soccer family, so she grew up around it as well. So she likes it, and my daughter right now is enjoying it. Just hoping that she sticks with it. But I try not to put any pressure on her and just let her do her thing. And hopefully, as she gets a little bit older, and I know she's probably going to stick to it, and maybe push her a little bit harder.
How is it different than coaching a player? I guess like, 'cause you've been, we'll say, like a father figure to a lot of students of the game, you know, players. How is that different? Like, how do you coach your daughter?
Well, I try not to coach my daughter. So she also does martial arts. So there's a day after school, and she asked me if I can work on some martial arts with her. And so I did martial arts for a few years growing up too.
Oh,
so
wow. What did you do?
Taekwondo.
Taekwondo. See, I didn't know this. All right.
Yeah. So I'm correcting her, and it wasn't harsh at all. I'm correcting her, starts crying, and I said, and I tell her, I'm not going to work with you if you're going to be crying. And she comes up and asks, like, if you're going to cry, I'm not going to work with you. She's like, okay, I'm not going to cry, but just, you know, and I think, you know, it's different, you know, 100%. Hearing correction from your dad versus a coach is always going to be different. So I try to stay away from it.
Yeah, that's the tough part, man. I mean, I don't have kids, but I've been a kid with my dad, man, and he's hard, yeah. And it's like, it comes down to, you know, when you're a kid, you just like, you don't want to hear it from a dad, you know, you'd rather hear it from the cool guy that has tattoos, and, you know, like, you're gonna listen to that guy. I'm not gonna listen to my dad, you know. So yeah, totally. I was gonna ask you one more question about music. Do you listen to any new school rappers? As I was asking all these guys on the team, and they're listening to, you know, Polo G, Lil Durk, Lil Baby. Do you listen to any of those dudes?
The newest rappers I can think of is J. Cole, and he's not very new. So, you know, Drake still making music. I like Drake, J. Cole, he's but
nice. Kendrick?
I like Kendrick. But after that, Migos, I like some stuff from the Migos, which is kind of weird. Everybody's like, what? I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about some of these guys. But yeah, other than that, I don't really.
You gonna be listening to hip hop when you're a grandpa?
I think so.
I think you said that one time in a tweet. I wanted to pull up some tweets, but we'll stay away from them. Do you remember in the youth times, like you would assign players to watch? Like you would assign individual players on your team, like who to watch. And I still remember that. You assigned me Riquelme. I wanted to talk to you about, like, I guess who your heroes were. Who did you look up to as like a soccer player, or, you know, in the West Michigan area, and I guess also just in general.
Professionally, I mean, the first big one for me was Ronaldo, the real Ronaldo. The real Ronaldo is what I go by. He's always probably one of the biggest ones for me as a player growing up during that time. Yeah. Then he ended up playing for Barcelona for a little bit, which was huge also for me. But other than that, it's Maradona was always a big one.
Yeah.
I didn't get an opportunity to see him play when I was a kid because he came before me.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, I mean, nobody as big as an influence as Ronaldo. Outside of that, there's many, but not anything to his level.
Said the real Ronaldo. Sorry out here, Cristiano fans. So yeah, man, that's kind of it. I wanted to thank you for being on the show today. It's always nice having a chat with, someone that I've known since I was 8 years old, man, and still in the circle. Still, it's wonderful coming back around to this Ole culture where there's music, there's a familiarity to it. It's really like a family, man. It's and a lot of it, and I know you don't like these type of compliments, but it's come from you and what you've done. There was a quote that I recently read about this guy that did Nike. I don't know, he just recently passed away. I can't remember his name right now, but he said, "Young people will be the architects, and they won't build buildings," or something like that. And I immediately thought of you and just kind of the architecture of like socioeconomically, like socially, you've created this whole world of people, as well as this vehicle of soccer, and just created a dope environment, and you've been a cool guy to be able to kind of look up to. You've created other heroes, you've created these soccer moves called the Rubinho and all this. So it's been cool to be part of that community, and it's continuing. So it's cool to be, part of it, and I wish you the best, man. I hope.
Thank you.
And I think your game is in good hands, man. Your impact is gonna be forever. So thanks for being here, man. We'll catch you later, guys. We're gonna be doing some more player interviews coming soon. Peace out.
Thank you. Thanks, man.
No problem.